welcome Peter Johnson from Huntsman Textile Effects, who's based in Switzerland. And it's what, 8 in the morning there? 8:30?
8:34.
8:34.
Swiss timing.
Peter is the Manager of Product Environment and Safety and Product Stewardship, and has been instrumental in developing Huntsman Textile's interest in sustainability. So Peter, we'll hand over to you, and when you're ready, if you could start sharing the slides. I'll just turn off the volume at this end. Off you go. Thanks.
Right, so good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you all. Is that showing now, Gail?
No.
Can you see the screen?
Not yet, it'll be coming in a sec. It's
We're seeing blowing up the...
we can see you blowing up party whistle.
Oh.
Is that what you're doing right now?
Well, that was New Year. Here we go. Yeah, well, it was, you got to let your hair down sometime. How's that?
It hasn't come up yet.
It's coming up now.
Okay, yeah, it's doing something.
Yeah.
3, 2...
Okay.
Not quite yet.
Not quite yet. No
Still
technology.
thinking. It's Australian
Okay.
time. There we go. Okay, we've got it.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Hello and good afternoon again. So I'm going to speak roughly 30 minutes. Hopefully will interest you and inform you a bit about environmental and consumer concerns with textile production, linking that to sustainability. If I say anything that's outrageous, then somebody can shout at me and I can make a comment straight away, otherwise I'll answer questions at the end. Okay. Here we go. I'll start by just a quick look at the consumer today, then a bit more time about sustainable textile production using some real life examples to show that it's not just hot air and talk, there is real benefits, real improvements that can be made, and then touch a little bit on what I'm calling selling the message, because with you brands, retailers and designers, if you want to be sustainable and inform the consumer that you are being sustainable, you have to sell the message. So the rise of the informed consumer. When people go shopping, I'm sure it's the same in Australia, it's the same everywhere in the world. When you're buying clothes, the first thing that you might be asking is, well, does it look right and does it fit? Then the next question some people might ask is, does it make my bum look big? And the answer for all gentlemen in the audience is yes, it does not make my bum look big, and you must not hesitate. You might also be asking, well, how much does that cost? Goodness gracious me. But the informed consumer will also be asking, well, where was it made? Is it safe for me to wear? They might even ask things about the carbon footprint or how much water's been used, might ask about child labour, all these kind of things people are starting to ask about. And when people are talking about safety and sustainability, there are many things that can be included within that. So, is it safe can encompass safe to the environment, so that would mean minimise pollution to the air, to water and to land. If you're being sustainable, then you want to optimise resources, because if you're wasting energy, if you're wasting water, you're wasting time and chemicals, obviously that's not a very good thing. So if you're doing things efficiently, doing right first time processing, using the least amount of energy and water, then that's good for everybody. You also want to ensure the safety of the workers, so you need to have environment, health and safety standards in mills and plants, make sure the workers are safe. And because we're all consumers, then we want to make sure the consumer has safe articles to wear, to use, and also that the consumer is satisfied so that the next time they want to buy an article of clothing or some furniture, they will come back and buy from you and your brand. If you want to make sure something is safe, then normally this is done by national and international legislation. And the chemical industry is probably the most regulated industry of any across the whole world. And we have to classify all our products in terms of explosive risk, flammable, toxic, environmental impact, etc., etc. And we are restricted in which substances we can bring onto the market, and we have to inform and educate the users. And so, not being complacent, but if instructions are followed well and carefully, you can ensure safety in the workplace. And we're talking about sustainability and environmental impact as well. Improving health and safety in the workplace has only an indirect impact on environmental and consumer safety. Which I mean, if you're making sure that workplace is safe, that would minimise the use of really hazardous substances, so that minimises the chance of those being on the textile, so that affects consumer safety, and it indirectly affects the environment because you won't be disposing of dangerous chemicals into the environment, but it does nothing about the use of energy or the use of water. I won't spend much time on these next couple of slides, but just to show there are plenty of rules and regulations in Europe and also in America about such things as special regulations for toys, phthalates, which are involved in PVC, which can be on textiles, the use of biocides, the use of the banning of certain dyes that can, under certain circumstances, relieve carcinogenic amines. Very technical, don't need to know the detail. Dimethyl fumarate is a fungicide that was in the news recently, last couple of years. In the States, they've got California Proposition 65, which means that anything that's sold in the state of California that is contains a suspected carcinogen has to have a label to that effect. Then there's a Consumer Protection Safety Improvement Act, which looks at issues with, most recently, with toys and lead paint and things like that, and the Consumer Protection Safety Commission. So there's all sorts of safety laws. Again, if you want more information, probably the best thing is to Google it and go web. Brands, retailers and the like. This is more to do with you, more directly you can relate to these kind of things. Many brands, many retailers across the world have their so-called restricted substance lists, which is, as its name suggests, is a list of chemicals that they do not want to be present on the garment as sold in the shop. These lists can be very simple, maybe 1 or 2 sides. They can be very complicated, going for 20, 30 or 40 sides. And it covers the kind of chemicals that are regulated or a concern. So issues such as formaldehyde springs to mind, heavy metals, certain phenols, phthalates, pesticides, a whole big list. And the aim is make sure the textile article is safe for the consumer to wear. And the Text Standard 100, I think you're going to hear more about that later, is one of the earlier independent standards. It started in Europe, but it's worldwide, and a common reference point, and a very good reference point for the restricted substances, and to make sure by testing the textile to make sure they are not present on the articles that are sold in stores. ReDesign Technologies is another one. There's a little label there you can see over on this side here. Gone back. There we go. It's the Independent Industry Textile Standard. It's a more involved scheme. So as well as making sure that the textile article is safe and does not contain restricted chemicals, they look also in the production process to make sure resources are used efficiently, so auditing on energy and water especially, but also looking at emissions into the air and to land and to water. So that's a more holistic kind of approach, but with the same intention to make sure textile is safe to wear and also the production is more sustainable. Another organisation that you may or may not have heard of, EA, based in Europe, it's got a branch in America, and they run a concept called Cradle to Cradle. And the idea is there, you design an article, it can be textile, it can be office furniture, it can be a baby buggy, all sorts of things, so that it's designed that in the end of life you don't just throw it away, but you reuse it in one way or another and complete a cycle. So it's cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave. And the options are for a textile article, a cotton article, the idea would be end of life you compost it, make new soil and therefore grow new crops. Or if it's a metal article or a plastic article, you melt it down and reuse it, recycle it that way. But again, not too much details here. But if we want to be sustainable, being safe will not save the planet. So yes, it's true, the restricted substance list will control what is on the textile, has no bearing on how that textile was produced. So it doesn't answer the question how much energy, it doesn't answer the question how much water, or efficient use of chemicals. So today people are talking more about sustainability. It's a bit more sexy, it's more in the public eye. And if you want to be sustainable, or anything you want to do, if you want to do it well, you've got to measure it. And how do you measure sustainability? Very good question, and there's no simple answer. One thing that is commonly used these days is the so-called water footprint. So that's a measure of how much water is used to produce 1 kilo of your product, whether that's a textile article or a kilo of butter, a pint of milk, or a cup of Starbucks coffee. You can again go on the internet, you'll find all these kind of figures, and sometimes it's quite amazing how much water is hidden within a product. You can also do a carbon footprint. It's commonly used. You may be seeing labels already on some articles to make this product so many tons or kilos of CO2 were emitted. If you want to do something even more thorough, you would do a life cycle assessment. And that's where you look at all the inputs into your product. So that's the energy involved, the water involved, the energy used in transporting the product, the raw material from one place to the next place to be then made into another product and then transported somewhere else to be made into something else, and all those kind of factors. So that's a really, really, really big exercise. It takes an awful lot of time and takes an awful lot of money, but it is being done for some products and some industries. Or you can make a more simple energy profile and resource utilisation, do some kind of audit. So you would look at a processing mill and measure over time and look for improvements in how much energy is used to make 1 kilo or 1 ton of your cotton article, if it's cotton, or how much water you're using to make that. And when you measure something, you can see improvements. But in sustainability, there are, at the moment, no unified standard methodology. There's many different ways, so that makes it somewhat confusing. It means you can't always do good comparisons. So what we tend to do in the textile chemical industry, where we're involved, we're kind of looking at things that people can easily measure and easily understand. So we concentrate on water. Obviously, we concentrate on chemicals because we try to sell chemicals. We're looking at energy, and we look at time savings. These are all things that people can easily understand, easily measure, and easily relate to. I'm going to show a few slides now, principally related to cotton. I'm choosing cotton because the biggest section of textile production is cotton across the globe. And cotton does have some impacts, environmental impacts. So looking here at cotton, there are many stages in cotton production. You've got the cultivation, growing it. You've got spinning, then you have weaving and knitting, wet processing, where the chemical industry has a big impact, and garmenting, that's where the sewing up and making. And this organisation, the Otto Group, that's a big German retailer, made a simple overview on the impacts of these different processes on water, on effluent, energy, and society. And basically, the darker colour you see, the more impact it has. So quantify or critical, but you can start by say with cotton cultivation. You've got, depending on how you grow the cotton, if you're using a lot of irrigation, then you're using a lot of water. Effluent could be a problem if you were spraying a lot of pesticides. Energy is not so important because that's dependent on how you're using cultivation, lots of tractors and the like. Chemistry is a potential problem if you are again using a lot of pesticides and artificial fertilizers, and land use is also an issue. Society is some impact if you think of child labour or exposing workers to chemical sprays. Spinning has only real impact on energy and society, but wet processing, where we're involved and where there are some big impacts which can be improved. Processing cotton takes a lot of water. Using a lot of water means you create a lot of effluent. You can use quite a significant amount of energy. Yes, you've got to use chemistry if you want to have cotton that's bleached, that's dyed, that looks nice, performs well. It doesn't happen by magic, you need chemistry to make it happen. So there is some chemistry. Land's not a really big issue. Society is, again, things like labour conditions, health and safety aspects if you don't use chemicals properly. So hopefully that's clear. Basically just shows that different stages have different impacts, and wet processing, dyeing, bleaching, printing can be significant. Another source of information, Cotton Incorporated, worth checking out on the internet, find them, got some very good websites. And you can see on this slide the different stages in processing cotton. It starts at the bottom and works upward, don't ask me why. Maybe so that for you in Australia you're working upside down, aren't you? So you start with desizing, then scouring, bleaching, mercerizing, dyeing, printing and finishing. Desizing, here we're looking at how many litres of water is used when you're processing 1 kilo of cotton. So there's a range depending on the kind of equipment you've got, how efficient you are. So desizing up to 50 litres per kilo. Scouring, very similar. Bleaching, if you're doing it continuous on a batch process, efficiently, not efficiently, up to 125 litres per kilo. Mercerizing, that's a treatment you give to cotton, treat it with a caustic solution. It gives a nicer handle, a nicer appearance, can stabilise your shrinkage, but it uses a lot of water. Dyeing, from here, LLR, that means low liquor ratio. Very technical, and the technical people in the room can explain that better after my session if you need more information from Frank Calaci perhaps. But a low liquor ratio means you're not using very much water per kilo of cotton, and a high liquor ratio you're using up to 150 litres per kilo of cotton. Printing, and this saddens me because my background is from textile printing, depending on how efficient and the kind of printing process you use, whether it's pigments, you use not much water. If you're using reactive dyes, you're using a lot of water per kilo of textile. And finishing doesn't use much. So you can see what the details don't worry too much, because in all the process stages there is scope for improvement. And again, don't worry about the details. The grey means what is on average currently used in the industry to process cotton, dyeing it in a batch machine, so-called jet machine. And here, the liquor ratio, that's how much water per kilo. So 12 litres of water, 1 kilo of textile. 80 degrees, takes 3 hours. You need to wash it 5 to 7 times to make sure all the dye stuff's gone, so that the finished article in the house, when you wash it in your machine, doesn't stain every other article you put in the washing machine. Then you make an average for the whole process. And the best available technology, if you use the most current machinery, the most current dye stuffs, you can significantly reduce the amount of water, reduce the temperature, reduce the time, reduce the washing off, so the total potential is up to 60% saving water usage. And this is where I relate this to a real life situation. This is a textile mill in Bangladesh. There's an awful lot of textiles produced there these days, and water is an issue because there is a very big population in Bangladesh. It's growing at a dramatic rate, and clean drinking water is already an issue. And if you're wasting water processing textiles badly, that has an immediate impact on people's living standards. So what we did as a company, we did an audit of the mill, who were producing 20 tons of cotton a day, looked at how much water they were using, how much electricity they were using, and you can make a conversion from electricity to convert into equivalents of CO2 by optimizing the processing, getting the right first time dyeing, using better chemicals, significant reduction by a third, again a third, so roughly a third, and then by introducing a new technology, which is a range of dyes that Huntsman, this is not an advertisement for Huntsman, but it happens to be that Huntsman made these new dyes that use significantly less water, electricity and CO2. So now these have been introduced and the water consumption is significantly reduced, less than half it was before. The amount of energy now is much reduced, which means less CO2 emissions. And this is the small commercial break. Do not switch off your TV, but you don't need to worry too much about the name. Just remember from this, the responsible chemical industry is all about making improvements. So from the commodity, from the cheap and cheerful suppliers who are everywhere around the world, or the average best available technology today, or our new processing, in nice pictures, a third of the amount of water, almost half the time, significantly less so CO2. So if you do care about how you want to produce your textiles, you need to ask the question of your mill, what technology are you using? If you wanted to do a life cycle assessment, and I wouldn't rush into doing that now, you have to look at the whole life cycle. That's logical. From use, from recycling, manufacture, packing, distribution, going round and round, and eventually disposal, and at the start of the life cycle, extraction or growing the cotton. Yeah, I think we'll jump past that. I think that you can see from that it's very complex. You have to consider everything, and if you want to do it properly, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And you normally pay a consultant, and when you pay a consultant, that means a lot of money. Yeah, that just repeats what I was saying. You look at all the different aspects, so you can see might impact health, might impact the environment, resource, climate change, and all these and hundreds more. You can see it's complicated, expensive. Why have I put this slide called responsible care? Just to say that the chemical industry worldwide, with 53 national associations, have signed up to this programme, and it embodies a spirit of sustainability because it's encouraging companies to focus not only on production, but all aspects of a product's life cycle, so-called product stewardship, to minimise the environment, health and safety impacts of chemical products all the way through the life cycle, from research, from sourcing, from manufacture, from use, consumer use, and end of life. So the reason for putting that up, that's the logo of it, is again, if you are taking sustainability seriously and you do want to control what's happening down your supply chain, it's the only way you can do it. If you want to really be sustainable, know your supply chain, then you could ask your mills, the dyers, the finishers, are your chemicals coming from companies that have signed the Responsible Care Programme? And as always, of course, there's a website, and I encourage you to look at that, www.responsiblecare.org, and you get a lot more information about who's involved, what are we doing, some news, which countries are involved, which companies have signed up. Okay, time's going on quite well. I think I'm doing all right. Brands and retailers, in my opinion, and not just my opinion, I think it's understood, it's known, brands and retailers really have the power in the textile industry. They call the shots. They decide what kind of fashions they have in dramatic impact down the supply chain. And many of them are behaving very responsibly. They're going beyond just using restricted substance lists, of which, just a useless fact for you, we know in our industry of more than 200 different brand and retailers restricted substance lists. From the big players listed here to some of the small ones. But what I'm showing here, again, don't need to go into detail, is some of the brands and retailers are going beyond, is my article safe to wear. They're looking at, so Patagonia, looking at what they call the footprint chronicles, so they're doing a full life cycle assessment on their outdoor wear articles, so the jackets and trousers and shoes, they're looking at all those. C&A, the big European clothing retailer, they've gone very much into bio-cotton, better cotton initiative. Organic cotton, they're big use of organic cotton. H&M, they're very concerned about the water footprint, so they've got programs at their suppliers to measure and then improve the water consumption at their textile mills. IKEA, a great big furnishing company, They're very involved in the Better Cotton Project. Walmart, they've got a sustainability index. They're struggling with that, to be quite honest. Marks and Spencer's have got the so-called Plan A. Levi's have got eco jeans. There's lots of these kind of things happening. So you're not, if you want to do these kind of things, you're not alone. You may or may not have seen this report or these series of reports from Greenpeace. They did it, started last year, August, September last year, I think it was, the so-called Dirty Laundry Report, focusing on pollution in China. And they targeted, quite deliberately, brands, that's listed here, H&M, C&A, Adidas, Puma, Nike, Li-Ning, that's a big Chinese company, G-Star is a European company, pointing out that the mills in China producing for these brands are polluting very badly. And they were also pointing out in the next report that many of the textile articles from these major brands and others that you could buy in the stores were containing substances that are on the restricted substance list, and they should not have been there. And then the next report came out earlier this year, pointing out that when you wash these textiles in your washing machine at home, wherever that is, you're then releasing these pollutants that have gone onto the textile, you're releasing them in your own market. So they put big pressure on these people, and they've united, come together to make a road to zero roadmap. And they've committed, these brands have committed to improve the situation in China and other major textile producing countries to minimise or go to zero the discharge of pollutants as listed by Greenpeace. So the reason for putting this slide up, apart from having nice pictures, is Greenpeace and other NGOs are informing the consumer, and that is impacting on the brands that they've got to improve their act. So being sustainable, being clean, being green isn't an option that you can ignore. You have to do it. But don't consider everything as an opportunity, as a threat, sorry. It is, a threat can be an opportunity. And if you are going to be sustainable in your textile production, you might choose to inform your consumer and say, I'm being sustainable, I'm doing good things, and here I can prove it. You can sign up with a company, join an organisation called Historic Futures, and they have a tracking system so you can trace all your products from your store all the way back to the field in Australia or China or Africa where the cotton was grown. And people like Organic Exchange and Maybuy and others are using this tracking scheme. And I believe Marks and Spencer's are going into something on this kind of line as well. Okay, this is coming near to the end. I hope I've given you some food for thought. What I really want you to understand is that a good chemical company, such as Huntsman Textile Effects, we are innovating still. We are trying to make new products and processes that help the textile mill conserve resources, with that example of Abitero. We work to the highest standards of product stewardship. We do care about our products, how they're made and how they're used. We have a lot of textile knowledge. We cooperate with machine manufacturers, with fibre producers, and with people like the Global Organic Textile Standard, with Urcatex, with Responsible Care, with Blue Sign, with the brands, the retailers. We try and be involved as much as we can. We help implement the introduction of new processes at textile mills. We can help in auditing some dye houses to make sure they're doing things well. doing things better, finding scope for improvement. We've got a dedicated business development team who are looking at brand and retail marketing. We try and be involved, educate and inform. So, a conclusion. If you do want to be sustainable in your textile production, you can't do it by yourself. So you, the brand, the retailer, the designer, you might have the bright idea, the good idea, you want to be more sustainable. You can't do that by yourself. You need to go down the supply chain to the textile mill. They need to clean up their act. They need to use the right products, the right processes, and consider the environment. But they can't do it on their own. They need to get the right dyes and the right chemicals with the right machines, the right processes, and all three working together, we can make a sustainable textile solution. So I think that concludes on my part, the slides as they are. I hope I've given you food for thought, and I'll gladly answer any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was really terrific. Can you hear us at this end?
I can still hear you very well, thank you.
Oh,
yes.
good. No, that was fascinating and a very good balance to the other speakers that we've had today. So, thank you. I'm just wondering whether you've got time for a couple of questions, or do you need?
Certainly.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Peter? We have one.
No.
Do you want to come up, Lara? Okay.
Where do you suggest to someone who's starting to approach this, where should their first port be?
Okay. A lot of the businesses here are quite small, and if they were to start exploring this issue, where do you think would be a good place to start?
Good question. You have to understand your supply chain. So you're small, so you're buying your textiles, your dyed polyester from somewhere. You must know who is that? Well, where are you buying? Where are you sourcing those goods? And you know that, and you're going to know that hasn't changed.
It's
You need to disable webcams as well.
Just the microphone, webcam. You said on the webcam.
Yeah. Oh, not the microphone.
hang on, Peter. We're just having a bit of trouble at this end. Just bear with me for a sec.
Sure. Give me time to think as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's working now.
yeah. It's just when you switch on the webcam.
Sorry, if you wouldn't mind just we just sort of missed most of your answer there. If you wouldn't mind just repeating it. Sorry.
Not a problem. As a small designer, retailer, you need to have some knowledge of the supply chain. So where are you buying your textile? And you might be buying it from a merchant. Then you need to ask that merchant, where is he getting the textile dyed or printed or finished? And ask them, which types of dyes and chemicals are you using? Or, for example, are you working to, can you label your textile with the Architects 100 standard label? Or are you working with Blue Sign? Or are your chemical manufacturers signed up to responsible care? You've got to start asking the questions. And if you ask the questions, you might get some answers you didn't want to hear. But at least you can then start looking and making choices. Yeah, it's not easy. It's certainly not easy. And the trouble with the textile industry is the supply chain is so complicated and so diverse. You're in Australia, you might be using, hopefully you're using homegrown textiles and supporting the Australian textile industry. There's also a very high chance that your textiles are being imported from Asia, from China or Latin America. And that makes it more difficult to track and control. But you just have to keep asking the questions and demanding the answers.
Yeah.
serious, and I'm sure you do, or else you wouldn't be at the conference, you have to start asking the questions and digging in.
No, I think that's good advice. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Peter. We really appreciate it. It's been really insightful, and we're now going to have a panel discussion where we'll mull this over with our local businesses that are looking at or are using more sustainable dyes in their fabrics and garments. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and yeah, thank you.